Hello and well met. This is Layron with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to step into some content creation using Fantasy Grounds Unity 4.3.4. This is the latest and greatest version as of March 6, 2023, excuse me. And I'm going to use some tools, external tools to create content. I'm working on a one-shot, and I kind of wanted to give you some little bit of context for this. So I gave, this is a kind of the outline of this. So this adventure was going to assume that it's a DnD5e rule set, set in the Forgotten Realms fantasy world. The players will be level 5. The amount of players will be levels 4, or excuse me, will be, the quantity be 4 to 5 players, minimum, maximum, respectively, and the writing style is definitely more of an adventure kind of fantasy writing. So what I'm going to do is kind of structure each one of the areas of the adventure like a 5-room dungeon. That is a method of creating content. So what I've done is just kind of give it a title. This is a one-shot adventure, just some of the basics here. And here is the introduction. So just to give you an idea, this can be inserted into like something like your the heists or anything like that that might be kind of similar related. So this would take place in Waterdeep and in Skullport, and it also take place in the Underdark. So what we have here is the party will be making their way through the Underdark via Skullport or maybe a secret portal or something from the surface up in Waterdeep. But as they make their way through the Underdark, they stumble upon a group of drow who immediately mistake them for being members of the Xanathar's Guild, which is part of the Dragon Heist lore, so to speak, in some of the past stuff. So before your group can explain themselves, the drow attack them. So it kind of forces them into a fight for their lives. So this is an ambush. So this is where the one-shot pretty much begins. And the way I formatted this was that each area or each section is going to be set up a certain way. So first thing would be the read aloud area. So the story-driven dialogue or any of the stuff like feels, smells, scents, all those sort of things that you can describe readily. The second section is GM info and lore, so all behind-the-scenes stuff. Then if there's an encounter, a trap, or a puzzle, it'll be listed. And then any treasure or loot. And then there's an aftermath or conclusion, which would be something that you might look at when you are trying to tie up that area or maybe to lead into the next area. So these are some of the methods that I'm using to create this content. And then you have a trade deal for Area 2, where they approach a small cave. You hear some sounds of some language, maybe in some that you don't understand. You peek inside, you see a group of Dwergar, deep dwarves, and drow gathered around a table. They're haggling about trade rights. And this is something you might overhear. What you do with this information, you can tie that into your heist or your story. So it just depends on what your purpose and your interests are. But nonetheless, that's Area 2. Then Area 3 is an area they find where there's some captured forced laborers in there. And you have to kind of liberate them. And there's probably some dangers involved with there. But they can also get information and even NPC allies at this point. And then the gauntlet area that they're going to come across is kind of like an open cavern with a bunch of pillars and raised platforms. And when they enter that area, it's going to be kind of a pincushion type thing where they have a group of drow that are hiding in this area. And they've kind of banded together under the leadership of a houseless female named Velora. Velora is a drow warrior. She's not a priestess. She couldn't actually hack it as a priestess, so she kind of stepped back and became more of a warrior. But she basically sets up this gauntlet to make it difficult for people to reach their lair, and that's kind of where this comes in. And then the last part of this is an escape. So you have to escape back to Skullport, and you end up finding this river, and it's an Underdark river, so you have to go through it and survive, make some skill checks, that sort of thing. And the river will lead to Skullport, and that'll lead you back to your starting point or back to your your conclusion. So depending on the outcome of the escape, the party might find refuge in Skullport, gather more information on Xanathar's Guild and the criminal underworld of Waterdeep. Alternatively, you may have made some powerful enemies, and then after you successfully navigate the dangers of the Underdark, you arrive at Skullport, the notorious port town where Xanathar's Guild and other criminal organizations operate. So you can choose to lay low, you can take your information and either gather more or sell your information. Either way, your journey through the Underdark kind of reveals a very complex and dangerous underground network of criminal activity. So you can easily tie this into the new heist content or the dragon heist or whatever you like, or even the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. So with powerful factions vying for control, there's a lot of kind of like underworld politics, that sort of thing. And then you have to decide how best to navigate through the dangerous world, if any, if you want to do that, to align yourselves with one of these factions. And then what I've done is I've created the main NPCs. So this elite drow champion is a female elf that is in charge of Bregendarth, which is Jarlaxle's group. So this is the group that they stumble on in the beginning. And this is one of his lieutenants, so she's pretty powerful. This is not the houseless drow leader. And then later on, they do meet Velora, which is another faction of drow that are basically a houseless group that live kind of on the outskirts of the Skullport, in which you're going to end up confronting her, whether it be combat, roleplay. But basically, Velora is a female drow leader. She's cunning, ruthless. She's a warrior. She leads a band of houseless drow in the Underdark. She's banded together with other houseless drow in order to survive in the treacherous world of the Underdark, where they are often hunted by other factions. They also have been known to engage in raids on nearby settlements and caravans to acquire resources and supplies, information, that sort of thing. Velora is determined to establish a houseless drow stronghold in the city and is always looking for opportunities to expand her influences. So then I made the drow champion for the Bregendarth. There's also some stat blocks for that, and then I did talk about a little bit about the relationship between both houses. So what I've done here is kind of tied in some lore, and it essentially kind of just gives you a rough idea of the relationship between all the different factions. So you have the Xanathar's Guild, you have a random drow houseless group that's kind of surviving together, and then of course you have the Bregendarth, which is Jarlaxle's group. So there's that, and then there could be much more. And then, so what we've done here is also take up the areas and give some ideas or prompts for the actual items that might be looted, if any. So like in the ambush encounter in Area 1, there's a small amount of gold potentially on the drow if you defeat them or capture them. And then there's the party can also loot the elite captain, and she'll have a major magic item or two. And then for Area 2, there's a small amount of gold and maybe a magic item or two. Let's see, yeah, so that's in the Spider Cave. So that's where they have some problems. And then in the Area 3, there's like a fungal forest type environment. There's some glowing mushrooms. You can sell and harvest those for a small profit. And the glowing mushrooms in this area can also be harvested and sold, in the Underdark or even on the surface. There's a half-orc merchant named Zek. He may offer a party a discount on his wares if they rescue him from the spider webs in Area 2. So there's an area where he's trapped and they get attacked by these spiders, and you have an option to save him. But it is going to come at a cost because you can either flee or you can, basically get out of there. So these are essentially all the different things that I'm kind of working on in this. And then the initial reason why the party is in Skullport can kind of be up to the GM and whoever's working on this content or whoever's going to use it. And what you have here is the party will be hired by a wealthy merchant or a noble to retrieve a rare artifact or some sort of resource. The party's looking to trade and establish a trade route and forge alliances or they are looking to explore and map out certain areas. There's about 6 different reasons I gave. And there is a table, a rollable table that you can use here. And what I've done is formatted this so that you can use this in a sort of dice roll type thing. So what I can do here, since it's been formatted and updated for the Fantasy Grounds platform, I can take the starting motives and make a table out of it. So if I copy and paste this, this will help put this into Fantasy Grounds quicker, so I can hit copy and paste. So actually I want that one or this one? Yeah, so I'll use this one. So this can be added. So this is your starting motivation option. So you can pick one, or you can roll, or you can just, insert it in your own adventure and decide how you want to do it. But I'm going to copy and paste this text here and go into Fantasy Grounds. And I've already was going to start a story entry, but I'm going to also do a table. And this is a kind of a basic table here. So in the Fantasy Grounds, this is a 5th edition rule set. Some of the other rule sets might actually end up being a little different. You might have to hand input these, but in this rule set, you can import the text. You can paste the data in here, which I'm doing now. And then, as you can see here, there's the separator here. And this actual information up here is going to be used for, let's see, I want to copy and paste that information. So I'll put starting motives table, because that's going to be the name of the table. And I'll just get rid of this part of it. And so I'm kind of updating the information a little bit so that there's some more formatting going on so that it actually parses correctly. And then you can actually take out any extra spaces that you don't need in here. But what I'm going to do is ask Fantasy Grounds to make this delimited. And instead of a simple table, it's going to have a little bit more options here so it will import correctly. And it's going to be separated by a pipe. So the reason we use a pipe, or that line there, is so that it doesn't pick up the commas in sentences. So if you have lore that has commas in here, it'll make that a whole nother row. So you don't want that. And then if you use a semicolon, you might have that also, or a colon. So you don't want it separated by that because of that potential problem. So that's why I use a pipe, because it's less likely for that to occur within a sentence. So that's my favorite separator. I think Matakure also uses that because he was saying something along those lines. But anyhow, this is the information that's going to be parsed into the table, and it'll just be a basic rollable table. But what's nice about this is you don't have to hand input it. You do have to do a little trimming, but let's see if it works. So there's the name of the table. The first header, the first row, is that a header in the first row? I'm going to say yes. So this top part is the header. And then it says table ranges in the first column. So there's your range of numbers. So I'm going to say yes there. So that's how it can differentiate what you have in your text. So I'm going to go ahead and hit import. And there we go. So there is all of that in one fell swoop. So what that does is it helps to allow for you to import tables a lot quicker. So that way you're not copying and pasting every line. Now in this case, it probably would have been okay just to do it that way. But if you have like 100 results, this is where this comes into really helps. It helps to have a description here. Like if you were copying and pasting this out of a PDF, you might want to put the page number or the original content, like where it came from, or maybe even the website where you snagged it from. You also have a notes tab that you can put any other information you want. You can even link a picture here if you want. This is just to give the GM more information. It makes it more useful and helpful. So now I'm going to test it. So I'll go ahead and lock it for a minute. The output is set to chat, so the players can see that if they want. We can actually share this table and let them actually roll it if we wanted to. So I'm going to just hit roll here. And it looks like it's option number 1. So the party was hired by a wealthy merchant or noble to retrieve a rare artifact or resource from the Underdark. Just roll one more time for good measure. And this one is the party is seeking to rescue a kidnapped ally or family member who was taken by drow or other creatures in the Underdark. So those are just some starting motivations. So this is a table that I'll link somewhere in the beginning of the adventure. That way we have something to kind of go on. It gives the GM more tools to work with. In most cases, they'll probably either pick one or they'll do their own story to bring this section of the adventure in, but this is just a nice little handy tool. I like to give out little tidbits and information for myself or for content I'm creating. That way it's easier to run it. And if you get, you kind of run into days where you just got writer's block or you don't really feel like, fleshing out a whole bunch of things. So that's why I like to include these. Also in this tables area, I'm going to make a category or a group. So you do that by using this little drop down arrow, click the plus button. It will default as group 1. That's just the name of it. If you want to edit that, you click the edit button, which is the red circle with a line through it. And what we're going to do is just call this the, I don't really have a good working title. If anyone can think of a title for a one-shot that takes place in Skullport in the Underdark, it's level 5, DnD5e. If you guys can think of a title for the adventure, let me know. And I can figure out one, but I don't really have a good one. So I'll just call it Underdark One-Shot for right now, because it's really not specifically tied into anything. Like I said, you can do it in between heists, or maybe you're running Dungeons of the Mad Mage, and you have kind of a slow part. You can throw this in there. So Underdark One-Shot is, I guess that's the working title for now. But you don't want to get too far into your content creation without some sort of solid title. And that's one thing I made the mistake of doing, is I got through an entire collection of building stuff, and I didn't have these things named what I wanted. So I had to go back and fix them all and then relink everything together. So that was horrible. So don't get stuck doing that. And I'm going to do the same thing with the story entries. I'm just going to call it Underdark One-Shot. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. Underdark One-Shot, but it does take place under Waterdeep and Skullport. So there's a little more to it than just Underdark, but that's what I'm going to call it. So that's that. And now that we have those together, now we can kind of have a starting point. So if we want to create content and have an area to paste the stuff in, we will. So what I'll do is create a couple story entries. That way I have somewhere to paste a text. One of these will be an index. And one of the important things to do is, if you're going to use story entries, which is something, by the way, that's kind of moving into more of the reference manual, but I still like to build the story entries for myself because I like the modularity of it. So I'm going to go ahead and make this 00.00. So this is going to be just like an index, something like that. So that way I have a starting point, and that will link all of the other chapters in there. And then I'm going to have an intro. So what I'll do here is title this 00.01, or maybe, yeah, so that's, maybe this is our intro. And then, gives you the backstory, setup, all that sort of thing. So there's the intro. And then the next one will be chapter 1. So this will be 01.00. And this will be area 1. So I'll say chapter. It's actually not really a chapter. The whole thing is kind of a one-shot. So I'll just say area 1. And then this way we have a starting point. So that's essentially what I'm going to be doing, is taking all these things here. So in the intro, when I copy and paste that in there, I'll also probably put that table in there, because that's where that would go. Because you're going to set up this information here. So what we can do is we can type in the backstory from our literature that I made earlier. So if I come up into this document that I've created here, and this is Notepad++, by the way. So this is the introduction, and it's very short, but this is what I'm going to use. So I'm going to take this information and then copy it into Fantasy Grounds. So this is the introduction, and if you know the shortcut keys in Fantasy Grounds, you can actually highlight that text hit Control-2, and that'll put the header in there. So that's what you want to do if you're going to highlight or make something stand out a little bit. And then it says, let's see, as the party makes their way through Underdark, they stumble upon a group of drow who immediately mistake them before they can really explain themselves. Drow attack, forcing the party to fight for their lives. So this is essentially where everything starts, like they're attacked immediately. So this is an ambush. So this doesn't really give us a story to start with. So I might create some kind of story that will kind of mesh everything together. But I think this starting motives table would be a good start, because that will kind of shape the beginning. So we'll put that here. And what this will do is it creates a link to this table. So if we're running this adventure or this encounter, we have that to go on right after the story is presented. So that's kind of what would do there. And then Area 1 would be the next section, which will be the ambush. So Area 1 has all this stuff, and it's essentially going to have more content to it. So let's see what we're going to end up with. So I'm just going to copy that information here and paste this in to the story entry, or if you're going to do the reference manual, you can do that. But this is where it actually this took Area 2 in there, which I didn't want. So I'll delete that. And then this is basically where you're going to organize your content. So you have a read aloud. So I'll go ahead and bold that. There's the GM info and lore. So we'll bold that and then maybe put a space after that. And then the read out loud description area is something that you're going to put in here as chat. So what we want to do is Control B. And what we'll do is we'll highlight the text, and we're going to hit Control 3, I believe. Yep. And then to add a speaker or the DM, as he's actually going to be saying something, because when I click this now, it goes into the chat, but it's very vague, and it just it doesn't really give you any sort of descriptor as to who's saying this, or if it's just narration. That's essentially what that is. So if I hit Control Tab, which is another shortcut, it inserts this little dot here, and I'm going to say DM here. So what that does is it assigns the speaker as the DM, or you can put GM or whatever. I think I'll put GM. It's a little bit more universal, because not everything's D&D, right? So here, you can enter a dimly lit cavern with rough, uneven walls and stalactites and stalagmites jutting out from the ground and ceiling. Suddenly, a group of drow led by a fierce-looking... This is actually a female warrior, not male. So I'm going to change that, because I actually was building the NPC, and I was hoping that this would have gotten updated, but it didn't. So what I'm going to do is led by a fierce-looking female, and she has a scar on her face. See, these are the little details you got to watch for. It emerges from the shadows, weapons drawn. So that's essentially what the little things that you'll have to go through to make this right. And then the encounter is the party must fight the group of drow, which consists of 6 drow warriors and a drow elite warrior, which is the male leader. So this is where it's handy if you have your NPCs already built, then you can just link them here, or you can build your encounter here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that process a little bit. So I'm going to hit enter, and this is going to be a bold here so that GM can see that. There's no treasure or loot other than maybe some tables that we can roll on to generate a little bit of loot from if they have any fallen NPCs. And then there's an aftermath or a conclusion. So I kind of like this setup because it gives the DM a little bit more information on how they're going to run, or potentially ideas on how to run this. It's not, I don't want to tell them to. Just going to give them some ideas. You never tell, you just kind of give them the tools to do so. So here is the actual aftermath. So if the party defeats the drow, they can interrogate one of them to learn more about their affiliation and why they attacked. The drow may reveal that they were sent to intercept a group of Xanathar's guild members who were supposed to be passing through this area. So this is a Jarlaxle Bregendareth mercenary group. So this is this woman here, that female drow that leads this group, is actually one of his lieutenants. So she's pretty badass, actually. So this is where the encounter is, and this is where I would link the encounter had I built it. So let's do that. So I want to make sure I have at least the SRD loaded. So if I go into my campaign, or excuse me, the library, and go to assets, or modules in this case, I don't have anything loaded. So you don't really need to have a ton of content, but I am going to bring in something. So for activation, I'm going to just type SRD. That way I have something to work from. So that kind of gives me a base to work from, so that way I'm not totally running blind here. And then I don't need the SRD, but I don't want to rebuild everything. So I use that as kind of my reference, or my kind of like my stepping stone. And then for that, what I'm going to do is make the NPC leader using the stat block. So down below here in this actual area here, let's see, what do we got here? Is this see, that's the house list. Okay. So what we have here is an NPC stat block. It's important that it's worded correctly, and I want to emphasize that if you're going to use the import tool for Fantasy Grounds, the actual text does make a difference, like how it actually parses. So I'm going to put this Bregendareth in here. So this is something that let's see, Earth. No. So this is so I know who's who, and then I'm going to copy this information here, and it's very important that you copy all of it, and you're not just grabbing the wrong stuff and that sort of thing. So let me do that. So I hit Control Copy, and I've already gone through and took out some of the problematic things that might mess up the parsing tool. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this up. And if you go to NPCs up here, you can see that I have some of the basics already loaded here from the SRD. I'm going to go ahead and make my own group just like I did with the others. And this is going to be the Underdark one-shot. You probably type that out and copy and paste it, so I'm not constantly having to do this every time I make data. But I also, in case someone joins in later and they're seeing, watching and they're not sure what I'm doing, so I'll do this, and then I'm going to actually add an item. So this is how an NPC would look blank. So you can do this, copy and paste every line. You can edit it manually, which is a long process. So I'm going to right click and delete that. I don't want to do it that way. So I'm going to actually import the text. This is the NPC import tool that's available in the DnD5e ruleset. So I'm going to hit Control V. This background information I do not want to have in the parsing area. So I'm going to put this in the actual background area. So this is going to be the area that describes the NPC and how she fits into the actual campaign, or in this case, this is just a one-shot. And you can format, you can link pictures to this, so you can do a lot of stuff. But for right now, I'm just gonna do this. Have background. I'm gonna actually, instead of making it bold, I'm gonna actually go with a header. And then when it's done, it'll look really nice. And then later on I can link the graphic to this. So here I'm going to actually take away the backstory because I don't really want that parsed in to the stat block. And all these other things here, I'm going to check to see if these are set up right. So if you notice here, there's these little colons. This is going to be problematic for the parsing tool. So you want to just have a period after each one of these actions. So quite often when you copy and paste from a different source, you'll have these, but they won't be set up quite the way that Fantasy Grounds likes to see it. So that's part of this. So here's the innate spellcasting. So this is generally listed here, and it says without expending a spell slot, so we don't need to take. So there's some things in here that'll throw off the parsing. So they have innate spell casting, that's fine. And you need to have a period after there, not a colon, not a hyphen, not a semicolon, because that'll throw that off. And then these are actually traits, so I wanted to put that in here. So that's a trait, and that's their innate spell casting. And then all their stat blocks. So this stat block format is not going to work for this particular NPC. So this has STR with colon after it, which is not going to parse correctly in Fantasy Grounds. So I'm going to get rid of the colons, and I'm going to hit Shift and put that underneath there. So what this is the D&D Beyond format for a NPC stat block. If you don't have it set up a certain way, it's not going to parse these correctly. So I want to make sure I have that, see if I have that set up correctly. We'll see if it parses. If not, I can adjust it. But you don't want any colons or hyphens or anything after those. And then as far as this goes, medium humanoid, elf with a comma, lawful evil, that's right. Armor class 18, and in notes it has half plate and shield. Hit points, I think that was a little excessive. I think I changed that at some point. So I'm going to break that down to 99. Keep it out of the triple digits. Speed is 30. I don't see any senses here. Oh, here it is, dark vision. Okay, yep. Language, Elvish and Undercommon. So one other language is going to be Dwarvish, because that's who they deal with sometimes. And hit enter there. So what happens here is I'm kind of massaging the data so that it parses correctly. Now I really hope that this stat block format works, because I know it's not the right, wasn't the right format. So that's something that you have to fight with. But if that's the case, and if I go into my my text here, I do have an example of how these should look. So this is how a stat block should look in Fantasy Grounds. So there's one for every space. There's a space after this. So this is something that you'll have to get used to with Fantasy Grounds and what to look for, essentially. Yeah, so there's a lot of opportunity for failure there using the NPC import tool if it's not correct. That's generally what happens when you're trying to import, is the formatting of the text isn't right. It just takes a while for you to get used to how they actually should look. See, like this one here is not a good one. This formatting will not work. This one will work. So this is another format that will work with the parsing tool. So you'll get used to that eventually, like what works, what don't. So let's hit the magic import button and let's see if that actually does anything. Yeah. No, see, the stats didn't actually parse correctly. And that's because the formatting of that text is not correct. So I'm going to right click on this and delete it. So this actual information right here is not good. So it's not going to parse correctly. And that's what you're going to fight with. Use the tool if you don't have a source that has the correct text formatting. So I'm going to take that information again, and I'm going to go into my notes here, go back to this drow here, and I'm going to try a different format. So I'm going to copy and paste everything in here except for the background, because I already have that. And this looks correct. That's right, that's right. Yeah, so nope, that's not the right one. Okay, let's go with this one. So this is where this can get really frustrating. So if you're using the import tool, this is the kind of stuff you have to go through. So copy that information, but what you can do here is do the editing so that you keep the editing and you keep the format that you want. So instead of doing it just there, I can do it in my example and actually fix this, so the next time I come back to this, I don't have to deal with that. And that's generally one of the things you can do to help yourself in this is to kind of get this formatted to help you deal with it ahead of time, so you're not having to go back and fix it every time. So I'm going to fix the stat block here in this Notepad++, and then you want to get rid of extra stuff that that you think will cause problems, and you won't really know right away until you actually start using the content. But this is really what kind of comes down to, is this fine-tuning editing before you import and use a parsing tool. Otherwise, you're just going to copy and paste one line at a time. It can be very cumbersome, take forever. So that fixes the weapons, the actions, the trait. Oh, there's a colon here. We want that to be a period. So there's little things like that you want to be careful of. Now this stat format here is not the correct format at all. And I even tried to edit that in the actual import tool, but it didn't like it. So this is the format that I want to try. Let's try this one. Yeah, so I don't care if the stat numbers are wrong or right. So this is what I'm talking about here. This is the actual one of the formats it'll accept. Oops, I didn't want to cut that. I wanted to copy and paste it. So I'm going to copy these two lines and then go back to my project here. I want to actually take this, delete it. Now this also gives me an opportunity to change the numbers. So strength of 14, I think I'll make that 15. A dex of 12, that is going to be, we'll make that 19. It had a 20 in the other one. I thought that was a little much. Con of 12, that's fine. Intelligence, I want that to be 11. Wisdom, 14, make that a 13, 12. And then charisma, probably a 12 there, 13. Okay, so this is essentially the stats here, and then it changes the saving throws and all that too. So that's something you got to be careful with. You change these, you also have to change this stuff here. So that's where it can get complex, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Those are easy enough to fix. And there's a challenge rating trait. So let's see if that actually helped. So I went through, got all that fixed. See if that actually helps. So that's the formatting for the stat block that you'll generally get tripped up on, is usually how the PDFs present that. They always put their own way of doing it, and it doesn't work for Fantasy Grounds. Want the official D&D format, not just your own or somebody else's interpretation of it. So this is that. And if you want to see how this is going to look before it parses it in, you can right-click, click this little wand, and it performs like a preliminary cleanup. So you can kind of get an idea of what this is going to look like. So I don't know if this innate spellcasting trait is going to work. It doesn't look right to me. It looks partially right, but we'll find out. So I'm going to hit import, and we'll see what happens. So yes, so that worked. So the stats went in there correctly, the armor class, the hit points, medium, humanoid elf, lawful evil. You can put a non-ID name so they don't just immediately say, oh, those are drow. Like I said, I have to go in and adjust these, which is no big deal. There's the challenge rating, the proficiency bonus, the XP. Yep, 2 melee attacks. Oh, here's the innate spell casting. So we'll test that in a minute here. So innate spells. This is probably somewhere that's going to have to go, the statement. So we can change that, but we'll see. So this is it should just be innate spell casting, and then so let me take that, copy it, and then come down here, and then for this stuff here, you can put the statement in here, which is an important part of this. So these are just their basic drow innate spells. See if that actually helps. Then I'll get rid of this trait here. There we go. Okay, so we'll see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and lock it. And how you test these now, it used to be that you'd have to close the NPC stat block and then, like reopen it. But now what you can do is you can right click on the character sheet, or in this case the NPC, and you can parse the tool. You can kind of reparse this information, or you can put it on the NPC in the combat tracker, and it will let you'll be able to tell if it actually worked or not. So let's go in here and take a look at the offense. Innate spellcasting. See, it set that up, but it didn't list the spells correctly because of the way that it's worded. So that's what so that's what broke the camel's back, I guess. So that's something that you'll have to deal with. So when you actually have a stat block, you really want to have the right formatting. So that is something that you'll have to get used to. There is no perfect way to do it, but there are some things that you have to be careful with, like the spell casting statement is something that looks like it's kind of right, but let me try it up there too. See if I can put it back in the trait, see if that. It should say innate spellcasting, that's correct. Because that kind of sets the action up, actually. Okay. Nope, that's not what I wanted. I wanted just the title. See if that fixes it. But this is really what, where the rubber meets the road, essentially, is where you're going to come across this stuff. So that it can be really cumbersome. So, all right, so that's that. That's that. So I'm going to lock the sheet. And then what I want to do is delete this off the combat tracker. Take one more look at this, make sure I have it right. Yep, there's that. All right, we'll see what happens. So drag and drop that there. So yeah, it just lists the spell, the trait, but it really didn't list the spells. So that has to do with the way that this wording is set up. So let me take a look at another drow and see how that looks. So if you go into your NPCs and you want to go into, let's go with the bestiary, and let's see if there's a drow in here. They may not be because it's a kind of a proprietary thing. So here's elf, drow, go. Yeah, see, this is what we're missing here, are these things. So I can copy and paste those over by making a copy of this elf and then editing it. So if I drop this down, I just basically made a copy in the same group. Crack this open. Go ahead and open this up. And what you'll see here is there are some traits here. See, the drow spellcasting ability is charisma. It can innately cast the following spells requiring no... See, that's not even what this says. That's what I'm saying. When you copy and paste this from a actual book, it doesn't give you that, and it should say once per day and all that stuff. So this is why that spellcasting trait won't work, is because of the wording. So if I copy and paste this, so hit Control Copy, oops, Control A, Control Copy, and I'm going to actually put it down here in the innate spells. That, and then it's called innate spellcasting. I'm going to get rid of this dummy one up here. That one didn't work. And then I'll copy the other traits in. So there's a trait here that we're missing from the drow itself. So Fey Ancestry is one of them. So we'll hit Control A, Control Copy, Control V, and the actual trait. A, Control Copy, Control V. So this is kind of the long way to do it. Nothing wrong with doing it this way, but when your source is broken and messed up, you're going to have to spend a lot of time like editing and, here's a saving throw against being charmed. Let's see, what's the next one? Sunlight sensitivity. Put that in there. Control A, copy, data itself. Okay. Okay, Control V. All right, so this is basically adding those traits, and I just stole them from a basic drow here. So as you can see, the spells are parsed correctly on here, which is something that you want to see. Okay, so now I'm going to lock this sheet. I'm going to delete the one off the combat tracker because if it won't update that combat tracker in real time. And then I'll just go ahead and drag it again, and we'll see what we get. So offense and innate spells. Yeah, so that didn't work. So I'm going to have to set it up as a trait instead of that innate spell. So it says in spells right here. All right, we're closer. So here's the Fey ancestry. Yeah, so that rest of that parse pretty good, except for the innate spell. So let's do that one more. So this is the kind of thing that you're going to fight with when you're working on these things. It can be a real bear sometimes. So let's go with... Or what you can do is take this information and copy it from another source and edit it. So even easier yet is to just take this drow that I copied and then make a different version of the drow, leave everything except for change the stats around, and then maybe adjust some of the weapons and stuff. So that's another way to do it. This is actually an easier way to do it if you're not familiar with the parsing. My problem is that I don't have a good source that's actually giving me the right information. So rather than going and re-editing everything and just trying to take advantage of the import tool, you can just make a separate copy of it and just edit it. I mean, that's the easiest way to do it without having to reinvent the wheel. Because this one's already kind of fixed. You don't have to worry about it, but you do have to change some things like the XP. I was going to add Dwarven here, or Dwarvish. I remember the stats were like, let's see, we had a 15, 19, 12, 11 for intelligence, 12 wisdom, I think. No, that was intelligence 12. Con 13. This is the boss, so. Okay, so that's basically the stats there. And then, of course, if you're going to change anything up here, you're going to have to change this. So this character is going to be a proficiency level of 3 when we're done with it. And it's going to change this actual stealth number. So what I want to do is put the actual XP field. So if I go in there and edit that, let's see what we have here. So this is a challenge 8, so 3,900 XP, that particular area. See what we got there. So go. And then this is not a quarter. The challenge rating of 8. So 3,900, and then this thing should adjust accordingly. So we want 3,900. Make double sure of that. Double check. Yep, 3,900 XP. And there it is. So the proficiency bonus is now +3. So that makes sense. So what'll happen is those don't auto adjust, right? So you have to take proficiency bonus plus whatever the in this case, this would be the 19 dexterity. So this is actually going to be higher. That's going to be a 7 for that. And then perception doesn't change because that's based on this score here, but it is going to go to a 3 because their proficiency level is 3, I believe. So that's about, I think that's about it. Yeah, so there we go. So they have perception, they're proficient with that, so we added the proficiency bonus, but they don't have anything coming from wisdom, so that's why we left it at that. And then this is the drow has advantage on saving throws. Yep, we got that. Now I wanted to change the weapons, but hand crossbow and short blade sound about right, but I wanted to give her a scimitar, something a little bit more beefy, or maybe a longsword. Actually, you know what? A flail. So here's a flail. It kind of reflects her time as trying to become a priestess. She probably went and tried to become a priestess and never did, so she ended up just being a warrior. And that's one reason why she kind of left her homeland, because she just kind of felt useless. So she couldn't hack it as a priestess, so she ended up just becoming a warrior and kind of went off on her own. So when you change something like that, what I need to change here are a few things. So the weapon itself, the attack, would probably be higher, because you not only have your proficiency bonus of 3, but you also have a strength bonus to calculate. So there's 2 there. So that's 3 plus 2. That's, so that's 5. So this bonus here is going to change to a 5. So when you go to change your stat blocks and stuff, you got to check these out, make sure that then your damage is going to be a little different. So in this case, instead of piercing damage, it's going to be bludgeoning. Change that, because it's going to be a flail now, not a slashing weapon. So bludgeoning, and you do have to spell these correctly. If you don't, that's going to be problematic. So you have 1 target, 5-foot reach, and here's bludgeoning damage, and then I need to change the actual damage. So what you can do there, if you don't know the damage, you can look it up online, or you can take a look at something that you might already have loaded. So in this case, I have the SRD, so I'm going to just type in flail for the items and see what it comes up with. All right, so yeah, it's 1d8. So it used to be 2d4 back in the day. If anyone quote me on that, I don't remember, but I thought a flail was like 2d4 back in the day, because you have essentially more than one surface hitting. You have a flail, it's usually 1 or 2. I think if you had one with a double knot on it, it'd be like 2d4 instead of 1d8. But this might just have one big ball of spikes on it. So 1d8, and then this plus 2 is going to probably be a little higher. Let me look. So no, that's right, because that's a strength bonus. And then the average here, instead of 5, is going to be a 6. So that's how you want to update that. This ranged attack is probably higher. So you have a plus 4 to hit, which comes from the actual dex bonus. And then you have the proficiency bonus of 2. So that's actually 7 now. That's what I'm saying. You got to kind of watch that. If you're going to change the stats around, make sure you change all of your actions and such, if that's the case. And then if it's hit, it's going to be that. That's fine. And it does have the poison already incorporated there, which is nice. I don't have to mess with that. So that's really all I had to do, was just change some things around. So I can change the title. So this is a Bregan the Earth Elite. This is a lieutenant. We'll just say lieutenant instead of elite. So Bregan the Earth Lieutenant. So, or we can just say boss or something like that. There we go. And then down here on the non-ID area, we can actually just say email drow. And what that'll do is, or we'll say menacing email drow. And what we'll do here is turn on the non-ID. So when this is added to the combat tracker, it doesn't immediately give away that she's Bregan Dareth. It will just say menacing female drow. So let's take a look at that. So now that I have this copy made, what I'm going to do is go here, go to this. Yeah, so this is the, I want to actually bring that in here. And then I can compare the two if I want to later. So this is the original one that didn't parse well. And then here's the one that I just edited from the actual sheet. I did have some artwork for this too, so that's another thing we could cover another time. But anyhow, so this is stat block. I'm going to drag this over into the NPC, into this combat tracker. And as you can see, it says menacing female drow instead of giving you the actual name. Once you make it visible, you can also identify it as a little separate thing, right? It's really hard to see, but it's above. Once you do that, it changes the name. So if she reveals who she is, or if someone recognizes her, you can change that. It'll update the combat tracker. Let's take a look at the offense. So here, yeah, see here's the spells listed, which is right. And then it has the weapon, including the unconscious effect for the poison and the flail. So that's all correct. That's exactly what you want to see. So that's how you check these things out, is to put them on the combat tracker. And then you can double click, see if the attack rolls work. And then damage. Yep, and then you can apply the effect if it hits the hand crossbow. So that's pretty cool. Yep, there's darkness. You can drop that on somebody. Fairy fire. Do this once per day or at will. That's cool. So that's essentially how you work with these NPCs. It can be a little bit time consuming and it can be frustrating, but once you kind of get used to using the interface and knowing where your resources are and how to format the text, it's really not as bad as it looks. So like if I would have taken the information, I'm going to pull up my D&D Beyond account just for the sake of argumenting. And I'll show that in a sec here. So Beyond. Okay, so I'm going to bring this over so you can view this. So what I could have done is, instead of doing it the way I was before, if you have a tool like this that actually has a good stat block in it, sometimes, like like I said, your PDFs might give you a problem. Depends on how they're formatted and who wrote them. But what you can do here is you can search for a drow. Maybe you might even find a Brigandere. There's a drow Shadowblade, Inquisitor. So there's different types that you can have here. There's a drow assassin, a mage. Here's an elite warrior. See, this would have been more ideal. So we click on that. We could have taken this information here and just copy and pasted it. So here, go to copy. So I'm just taking the stat block from the D&D Beyond area, and then just going in here into the NPCs area and just paste it in there. That would have been a lot easier. So just paste this in here like that. Oops, that just took the actual website. Actually, I might keep that for over here. Well, if you use links in Fantasy Grounds, if you copy and paste them into the actual chat window and it makes this link, you can link this into Fantasy Grounds, and that way you have a reference of where it came from. So if you're ever going to take something from a website or anywhere else and you want to link to it or attribute, that could be something that you do for your own good or for your own sake. And then I will take the lore from that page. If I bring that back up, let's see. So if I take the lore here, which is all this stuff down here, and bring this up all the way up to here, now that will go on the other side of Fantasy Grounds in the actual in this area where I have so there's that. And what we can do is we'll just say information, and then we'll put a bold here or some kind of header. So 2. And you could get rid of these double spaces, because you only really need one space. Otherwise, it's going to get very crowded quickly. And then if you want to highlight stuff, like if you want to make it to where certain things actually stand out, You could do that too. That way it's highlighted and you have, you know, some form of semblance of what things are. This is quite extensive actually for a, because they're including the drow part and the elite part of it. So that would be a bold there, maybe a bold here. So that way when it parses through, it's actually going to give you all of that extra data, and it's going to give you the basically what information you want to stand out. That's why I'm highlighting and bolding those. I'm just hitting Control B. So highlight the text, left click and drag, Control B. Here it says, I'm going to put this in italics. Elite warriors can be male or female. And let's see what we got here. So yeah, so that looks pretty good. This, I'm going to change that bold. All right, so there we go. So that's that, and I want to get rid of this actual link here. That doesn't belong in the parsed area. So let's go back to the page and see if I can grab that again. So I want to copy and paste just this text. Hit right click, copy. It probably just copied the link for the page and not the actual stat block. So now I'll go back, hit Control V here. And then, like I said, if you want to see how it's going to clean it up, see here's the text format, that's the other format. Right click, hit this wand, and it kind of removes the spaces and kind of gives you an idea of what it's. And it gives you a preview. Make sure you didn't lose anything or accidentally forget to grab some of the text. And hit import, and it should technically bring that in. So that looks really clean. So if you take a look at this, this is what it looks like. Very beautifully done and clean. You have all this. So that's really nice. And then down here on the other tab, you're going to have all this information, which looks really professional. And then you have all this too. So if you look at an NPC stat block from an older content, so like that one that we made earlier, I took this from the SRD. So if you have stuff from the older content that's not in the Monsters of the Multiverse format, it's not going to have a whole lot on the other tab. So that's something you'll notice with older content. You won't have this beautiful summary. It'll have maybe a link and a little bit of lore or something, but you're not going to have all of this stuff here. When you actually re-import NPC stat block using the new latest and greatest import tool, which uses the Monsters of the Multiverse formatting, you're going to get that nice summary back here. So if you want that and you just have a standard stat block, you're going to make a copy of it and reparse it back into Fantasy Grounds using the parsing tool. That's the only way you can get it this way that I know of, without going in and on the back end and editing all the XML data. So this is a nice format. This is kind of what you want to see when you're building your NPCs. So it's a kind of a choice thing, but I think I rambled enough. So that's content creation. We made a table. We started to input some of the data. So once I get this going, what I'll do is I'll take that elite champion and then I will make it into an encounter. So I'll bring up the encounters, make a new encounter. I will bring up the NPC for the boss here, which was her. I'll just use this new Drow Elite Warrior for now. But you just drag that in there and then take a regular Drow, a copy of it. So if I go to NPCs again, and I just go back to all filters so I can see everything, it's type Drow. Oops. Help if I spelled it correct. So here's the Drow, so I'll just make a copy of it, and then bring and drag and drop this copy into not only from the encounter area, but I'm going to drag this into my one-shot area. That way I have this in here. I'm going to delete this one so I don't get confused. So those are the two that are going to be part of that encounter, and then I'll just take this and drag this over. So the text says that there's going to be 6 of these. So as a user of Fantasy Grounds, I don't know if I would do it that way. So there's 6 there and the boss, right? And then I hit this refresh that gives you a challenge rating 6, and it's worth 2100 XP. So what I'm going to suggest, and you don't have to do this, is to make 2 encounters. One encounter would have it would have her and 2 bodyguards. So what I would do is take this, change that to 2, refresh that. Why is it still an encounter 6? Anyways, so that's that. And then I would go and make another actual encounter. So if I go to encounters, create another one. So I'll just call this ambush B, and the other one would be ambush A. So you know that this ambush was the main alpha one, this one's the beta one, and then this one would just have more of the same, the drow, and it would have 4. So that's really just a real basic way of kind of breaking up the encounters, because what happens is when you have these linked on the combat tracker, it becomes very cumbersome. So it ends up creating a lot of burden. You got like 50,000 different things on the combat tracker. So there's A and then B. So let space here, hit enter, and I will link A here. So what this will do is when you go to use this, it's going to allow you to add them in separate waves. So that's just a really good tip to know. So you might do wave this B first. So you send that to the combat tracker along with your party members. So if you got 5 party members, that's already 9 things on the combat tracker. So that would kind of introduce a lot of lag if you get more than that. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make is you got 20,000 tokens and 20,000 different NPCs and all kinds of stuff going on in the combat tracker. It can really slow things down. So this is what I would do is I would run this for probably 3 or 4 rounds, see how they're doing. If they're getting mowed over, like if they're actually not hanging, then I'll take this encounter A, which is the boss and her 2 bodyguards, and add that later. But by that time, you'd likely have a couple of these already gone. So maybe 1 or 2 of these guys have already gone down. So that kind of helps to mitigate that lag and all that craziness that can happen during your encounter. So that's just a suggestion. You don't have to do that. It's a little extra work, but it's really not it's not going to break the bank. And it really does help with things as you're going through your encounter. So DnD5e is not really set up well for mass combat. So that's kind of why I suggest that. And it kind of gives you a break, and you can kind of break things up a little. So my rule of thumb is, if your encounter is more than half a dozen, I usually try to break it up into waves. That's usually what I do is, between 1 to 8 NPCs is probably fine. But when you start getting beyond that, it can get a little bit cumbersome, especially if you have a large party of 6 people, and then you add in a whole bunch of others. That's when things start getting crazy. Now you can do it. It's just going to potentially create some lag for you and your table, depending. So that's just a tip, and I think I will shut it down for now. I don't want to make this drag on for much longer. I think I've gone on for about an hour. So, okay. So anyhow, you guys have a good rest of the week. Happy Monday, and